Before I tell you how he saved me with a cup of coffee and a weathered smile, let me ask you to sit with me, breathe, and remember the softest hand you've ever held. Because tonight in this gentle story, you'll understand why he is my life. Completely, utterly, forever. If this touches you, subscribe, share, and leave a comment for someone you love. Our stories keep hearts open today. There's a ring mark on our kitchen table where his mug always sits. You wouldn't notice it unless you lived here, unless you learned the rhythm of our mornings, the kettle singing, the light moving across the window like a slow dancer, the smell of toast, the patient whistle, the sound of him humming something old and sweet. It's a small home, creaking floorboards, a front porch with 2 white rockers we painted years ago and never got around to repainting. The mail slot sometimes sticks. Our dog Scout used to nap right in the sunniest patch until the afternoon shade softly pushed him elsewhere. We have a calendar with too many birthdays on it, and a drawer that collects rubber bands and menus from restaurants we love, and notes written in his blocky handwriting. If you're watching this at night, let me be the softness you need. If it's early morning, pour another cup and sit with me. I want to tell you how I met him, how an ordinary Tuesday in a diner became everything. He is my life. Folks say that phrase in passing sometimes, easy as a whisper. But when I say it, I feel my hand shake. The way it did the first night I realized the courage it takes to love someone in this world. I had just turned 31. My hair still remembered the last bad haircut I'd gotten from a friend who swore he knew what he was doing. It was late fall in our Midwestern town, the kind of fall that brings out all the browns and golds you'd swear you'd only ever seen in a postcard. The hardware store had already put out strings of holiday lights too early, if you ask me, and I walked into Miller's Diner like I had 100 times before, because their coffee could burn a hole through your worries and their lemon pie was a kind of simple magic. I remember shaking rain off my jacket, rubbing my hands together, finding the booth near the window where you could watch the street. The waitress, her name was Donna, and she'd been calling me Han for years, poured my coffee before I sat down. "Weather's got teeth," she said. I smiled, nodded, and opened a book I wasn't really reading. The door chimed. I looked up. He came in like he belonged there, like he belonged everywhere, which is something I noticed often later, and something I still notice when the living room is quiet and the clock ticks like a heartbeat. He had a weathered brown jacket with a collar that had probably brushed 100 good shoulders. He had eyes that weren't demanding attention, but offered something instead. A kind of ease. He glanced around, took in the booths, the pie case, the little stack of local newspapers by the door, and he smiled at Donna like he'd known her a long time. Maybe he had, and maybe he hadn't. For him, kindness never waited for an introduction. He sat 2 booths ahead, facing me at the angle where I could call it coincidence if anyone asked why I noticed him. He ordered coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and his voice was warm and low. He pulled a notebook out of his jacket and chewed the end of his pen like it owed him rent. He caught me looking, and I did what people do when strangers catch them looking. I pretended there was a fly near the window that needed my urgent attention. He smiled. Not the kind that says I caught you, but the kind that says, it's okay. We're here together, alive in this small place, and isn't that something? Donna topped off my coffee and said, "New face?" I shrugged, trying to be casual. "You know him?" I asked, like it was no big deal. "Nope," she said, "but he's got the kind of eyes that read the label on the paint can twice. Careful, that's good." He dropped his pen. It rolled down the aisle between the booths. You'd think pens would have the courtesy to stop under your own table, but no. That pen darted like it had places to be, and it landed against my shoe. I bent down, picked it up. When I looked up, he was already standing, already smiling that easy smile. "Thanks," he said. And then he paused, like he had more to say, like the next words were on the tip of his tongue, and he was tasting them to be sure they were right. "I'm Michael," he said, because sometimes names are the right next words. "I'm Daniel," I answered, into the electron-bright moment that glowed between us, as if someone had flicked the whole world to on. We talked. That's it. That's the miracle, really. Not fireworks. Not anything you'd put on a billboard. Just 2 men in a diner talking about the weather and the roads and the best place to get pie in a 30-mile radius. He told me he taught music at the elementary school, which explained his hum, the way he exhaled notes like blessings. I told him I worked in the hospital's logistics office, which meant I kept track of too many things and was learning to put a hand over my heart at the end of the day and say, enough. He laughed, easy and warm. That's a good habit, he said. I'm still learning it. It wasn't a date. It was a late morning that stretched to early afternoon, the way good conversations do, across coffee refills and the squeak of vinyl seats and the soft squeal of the door. He told me about his students, how they sang like their bodies were too small for the songs inside, how a shy boy named Caleb had started tapping rhythms with his pencil and discovered the drums as if he'd invented them. I told him about the older gentleman who came in every Tuesday through Thursday to visit his wife on the third floor, bringing her a blue hydrangea cutting in a mason jar like a tiny piece of summer. We were careful and we were brave, both at once, because back then, in that town, careful felt like part of being alive. He wrote his number on a napkin. Only if you want to, he said. No pressure. I took the napkin, folded it into my wallet like a secret, like a prayer that was learning to speak. We met the next Saturday at the farmer's market, because that meant we could be two men talking about tomatoes and not the ache under our ribs. The tomatoes were fat and red and the kind that make you forgive winter, at least for a little while. He bought a basket of peaches. He handed me one. You ever cut these with the skin on? He asked. Rinse them and slice. Nothing better. We sat on the curb, sun on our shoulders, juice running down our wrists. The world narrowed to the taste of summer and the sound of children laughing, and the easy way our knees touched, just barely, just enough to say we were here, right now, together. Our first date, the one we named a date, was at the drive-in that summer. The speakers made the movie sound like everyone was talking underwater, and the fireflies were the real show. He brought blankets. He poured hot chocolate from a thermos because the nights had that leftover spring chill. He had packed marshmallows, tiny ones, like the ones you find in cereal. I know, he said, half apologetic, half proud. It's a teacher thing. When our hands found each other in the dark, there was a pause like a held breath. I remember every inch of that moment, how the air tasted like cut grass, how the sky held itself open for us. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't rush. We were learning the patience of what is real. It took me a while to tell my family. You probably understand. Some of you watching know exactly how your heart beats in your ear when you decide to be honest in a room where you're not sure honesty will be welcomed with open arms. It was my mom's lasagna night. My dad was a man who loved the quiet and loved his tools and loved me like it was his job and his pride and his daily bread. We were a normal Midwestern family with a fridge covered in magneted school photos and a shed that smelled like oil and sawdust. They knew me, but they didn't know this part of me yet. I told them that night while the dog slept under the table and the neighbor's porch light buzzed like a summer fly. I said it slowly. I'm seeing someone, I said. His name is Michael. My mother's hand went to her necklace and her eyes went to mine. My father put his fork down. The dog sighed. Silence did that thing where it stretches like taffy and you can hear it creak. And then my mom blinked and said, Is he kind to you? I nodded. My dad said nothing for a long time, then finally asked, You safe? I said, I am. He looked at me, and his quiet, strong face did this softening thing I'd only seen once before when my grandfather died. Okay, he said. We'll learn as we go. Michael came for Sunday dinner 2 weeks later. He brought peach cobbler in a dish that had a crack along the handle. He wore a navy sweater. He asked my mom for her lasagna recipe before dessert, which I didn't understand at the time but later realized was exactly Michael. He wanted to learn how to love what you loved. My dad showed him the shed, the new drill bit set he'd gotten from Sears, and I hovered in the doorway, listening to them talk about wood grain and torque, and other words that were less about tools than about men trying to find a language they both felt safe inside. My mom pressed leftovers into his hands like she was already making room for him in the refrigerator of her heart. Years could live inside those early months. The music of them, if I let it, could still keep me awake at night. We built a rhythm, grocery runs, Saturday morning records, lazy Sunday crosswords where he'd get all the clues about presidents and birds, and I'd get the ones about baseball and desserts. He'd leave notes on the fridge. Don't forget to breathe today. He'd tuck them into my lunch. You've got this. I started keeping a drawer of his socks at my place before we moved in together, and if you've ever loved someone, you know what I mean when I say a drawer of socks can feel like the first brick in home. We got through things. We got through the kind of days that hurt to talk about. We lost a friend named Eli. He and his partner were two of the first people to take us in, feed us too much, loan us books that changed the way we understood the world. We stood in a church with heavy stained glass and held hands and didn't let go. Those were years where a diagnosis could feel like a sentence. I remember learning how to show up. Michael taught me that just as much as anyone. He sang at that service, a simple hymn, standing near the piano with his hands shaking just a little. The notes trembled, then lifted, then carried all of us like a boat on tired water. I learned the deep grit of love then, the kind that is not just fireworks and peaches and notes on fridges, but casseroles left on doorsteps and car rides at 2 in the morning, and arguments that end not with winning, but with holding the person you almost lost to your own stubbornness. A few years later, we moved to the city. It wasn't far from where we grew up, but it was far enough that we could breathe a little easier holding hands on a sidewalk. We found a little place with a crooked-floored charm and a landlord who fixed the heat with a kick. Michael got a job at a different school where a kid named Alma liked to stand behind the piano and listen to the vibrations with her cheek pressed to the wood because sound, Michael explained, is felt. I got promoted at the hospital. I was good at details and people. It turns out that's a useful combination when the job is getting what is needed into the hands that need it. We became the kind of couple who knew the barista's name and also the security guard at the hospital who quietly cried in the break room sometimes when the night was too long. We learned our city like a song. We marched at Pride, not because parades solve everything, but because joy is a protest of its own. People ask about the proposal, and I always have to resist the urge to say, it wasn't fireworks, it was apples. It was October in Michigan, and there was a farm with a hayride and a caution sign about bees. We wore wool hats and argued about whether cider should be warm or cold. Warm, he said, because it hugs your insides. We wandered rows of Macintosh and Jonah Gold and Honeycrisp with bags that were doomed to be overfilled because Michael never did anything halfway. He reached up for a shining one, and I watched his sleeve pull back and reveal the wrist I have memorized more than my own. I had been carrying the ring in my coat pocket for weeks, weighing the decisions that had already been made in the marrow of me. Michael, I said, like his name was the entire question. He turned, red in his cheeks from the cold and the joy of being alive. And I did it bent knee and all in boots, on damp ground that left a mark on my pants that never came out. My hands were shaking. Say yes so I don't faint, I whispered. He laughed that deep laugh that warmed the edges of the day and said, You're stuck with me. He always answered the question and the worry and the future in one breath. He is my life. He has always been the voice that makes the storm step back. We got married in a courthouse and also in a backyard. Because we decided to do both, and because love is both a vow you make in front of a person in a robe and the one you make in front of the cousins who still call you by your childhood nickname. The judge was gentle and the pen was heavy and the words were simple. The backyard had strings of white lights and my mother's lasagna on a folding table, and my father standing quiet and proud, then blushing when we caught him tearing up behind his sunglasses. Michael's father, who taught shop class for years, built us a wooden arch with his old hands. He hammered our names into the top where no one could see unless they stood on the picnic table, which our nephew promptly did. There they are, he announced, a little king. When we stood under that arch, people who had known us in other versions of ourselves clapped and shouted and ate too much cake. We danced to Sam Cooke on the grass until we fell into chairs and said, "That was everything." It was. And it was also the starting line, because every day after is another yes. Our life was not just big moments. It was Tuesday night meatloaf, and the way he always left a little extra water in the kettle for me. It was the argument about how to fold a fitted sheet. He's right. It is witchcraft. It was the morning we bought a cheap old sofa from a thrift store and discovered we couldn't get it around the stairs. So we camped in the alley with pizza and laughed until we cried. Until the neighbor came out with bungee cords and we all cheered like we'd won something when that couch finally squeezed through like a stubborn idea. It was the way he'd stop in the hallway at school and stoop to tie a kindergartner's untied shoe and then remind the kid, "You can do this part too, watch." It was the way he'd fall asleep on the couch with the dog snoring on his shins. And I'd turn off the lamp and kiss his forehead and whisper things no one needs to hear but that I need to say. We got a dog. We named him Scout because Michael's favorite childhood book was To Kill a Mockingbird, and because he'd always wanted to call out, "Scout, come!" across a yard. When Scout was a puppy, he chewed a hole in my favorite slipper. Michael stapled the slipper back together, which is not what any manual would advise, but that slipper lasted another 5 years. When Scout died, we buried him under the maple and planted hostas that summer, because grief too needs something living to hold it down in the wind. We had a table that always had room. There was a time in our city when a lot of young people came because they wanted to try to be themselves without asking permission. They found us or we found them. Michael had a way of seeing the person who was standing in the doorway, unsure whether they were welcome, and making space. We fed them, listened to them, drove them home at midnight, and explained very carefully how you steer into a skid when winter turns your street into glass. We were older by then, not old but older, and we understood the kind of fierce tenderness it takes to say, "You can always call us. I won't lie to you about the hard parts." There were the days when money stretched thin, when the car decided it wanted a new whatever at the same moment the refrigerator made a sound like it had opinions. There were the nights when we spoke to each other through a thin wall of not forgiving yet, because pride has slow feet. There was the time he forgot our anniversary and brought flowers the next day because he woke up with that lost look that only happens when you've hurt someone you love, and your brain races to fix it before the coffee is even poured. He wrote me a note that day that said, "I know the date of us is every day. I'm sorry about yesterday." I kept that note in my wallet for years until the ink faded and only the indentations of the words remained. I still run my thumb over them sometimes, like Braille for the heart. There was the health scare. That's what we call it. We who have lived long enough to collect a list of them. Michael had been getting winded on the stairs, which is easy to ignore when you are both busy and proud. He was teaching, coming home with stories and the smell of dusty chalk, tired in the happy way. But the stairs began to feel like hills, and the hills like mountains. And then there was this strange pressure in his chest. We sat in the ER under 2 bright lights that make everyone look like they need sleep. Monitors beeped. An IV line tapped the inside of his elbow. I held his hand. I know that hand like my own. I know every vein. I watched the numbers and understood none of them except the ones that made the nurse look calm. It was a valve, worn and stubborn, and it needed repairing. The surgeon had a steady voice and young eyes, and I was grateful for both. He explained it slowly, then again, and drew pictures because drawing is sometimes love. I kissed Michael before they wheeled him away. I said the words you say because they keep your own heart from leaping out of your chest and running after him down the hallway. "I'll be here. I will be right here when you wake up." And I was. I sat in that weirdly comfortable chair that every hospital seems to buy from the same catalog. I watched the sun move across the floor. I drank bad coffee and said a quiet prayer to the God of stubborn men who need to be around to finish what they started. He made it through. A different scar than the ones we had collected, but a scar that taught us tender care in the years after. He walked slow for a while and hated it, and I became the man who carried the groceries and didn't make a thing of it. We learned that holding hands in the hallway can feel like winning a marathon. We celebrated by buying a better kettle and deciding that from then on, we'd never wait for a special occasion to use the good plates. The years did what years do. They moved like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes fast, sometimes louder than you expected. We got more gray at our temples. We learned the miracle of good pillows. We got a younger friend named Adele who convinced us to try yoga on Tuesday nights. Michael was terrible at it. He fell asleep during Savasana and snored softly. What can I tell you? It was adorable. We started taking road trips because I needed to see mountains, and he needed to see every small-town thrift store we passed. We stood at the Grand Canyon and cried because sometimes what you need is a place where you can look at time carved in stone and remember your life is carved by your small kindnesses, your patience, and the way you rise with each other on days when you'd rather roll over. We went to New England in the fall once, because how often are you going to do that? We drove those roads where trees reach over you like arms. We stopped at a stand that sold maple candy shaped like leaves and ate it with our fingers sticking together. We stayed at a motel that had a neon sign and a front desk clerk who gave us a hand-drawn map to a lake where we could watch the sunset. When we got there, a little boy was throwing pebbles and missing more than he hit. "Good form," Michael said, showing him how to flick his wrist. The boy smiled like he'd been handed a new superpower. Michael turned to me, that grin full as summer. "I'll always teach anything I can," he said. "It's how I'm wired." I squeezed his hand and said, "I know." We went home and kept going. He would tell me a story almost every night. The name changed, the setting different, but it was always a story about someone learning they were enough. That's what he spent his life doing. That's what he did for me, too. On the days when my work got to me, on the days when I made a mistake that cost more than pride, on the nights I called myself 100 names and none of them were kind. He'd touch the back of my neck, under my hairline, where a person who knows you puts their hand when they steady you. "Hey," he'd say, "you are not that. You are mine." We grew older. The words sound simple, but they hold 100 small revolutions. How to choose comfort without losing curiosity. How to rise without making your joint crack like a floorboard. How to love that you've both become a little softer in the places that had been hard. We celebrated 30 years under that same maple where Scout rests now. We hung paper lanterns from its limbs and invited the neighbors whose kids had once thrown snowballs at our windows just to see if we'd catch them. We lit the grill. We ate too much potato salad. Michael sang, "Of Course He Did," with our nephew on guitar this time. And when the moon rose fat and bright, our youngest neighbor, a girl with braids and a facial expression perpetually set to wonder, asked us if we remembered meeting. We told her about the diner and the pen and the napkin, and she said, "That's like a movie." Maybe it was. Maybe every love that lasts is a movie no one else will ever see, played in kitchens and cars and grocery aisles. When the world shut down a few years ago, we shut our door and opened our windows. The silence in the city was not absolute. There were birds and sirens and our voices floating down the hallway like we were anchoring our little boat in a storm. We became each other's barber. He gave me a haircut that was heroic in ambition and charming in result. We learned our neighbors better than ever through the 6-foot language of waving. We cooked beans on Mondays, bread on Fridays, and once tried making a sourdough starter that we named Eleanor because she demanded so much attention. We talked to our people on screens and wrote letters like it was 1947. We took long walks in masks and discovered streets we'd somehow never seen. We learned the holiness of your own breath, the sacredness of a pulse in the wrist under your thumb. "He is my life," I said to the mirror sometimes quietly, to remind the man looking back to be kind to the man on the couch reading about gardening. When the world opened back up, we did too, slowly, like flowers that know better than to trust the first warm day. We went to a restaurant and shared pie that tasted like a place we used to visit. We sat in a movie theater and he squeezed my hand at the first quiet, sad scene. We gathered again around tables and remembered how to pass plates, how to say, "Take the last biscuit," and mean it. We held the babies the people we loved had somehow had while we were being careful. And we realized time had not stopped, just slowed enough for us to notice its soft feet. There was a day, 3 summers ago, when we met at Miller's Diner again. Can you believe it's still there? Donna's gone, but her niece runs it now, and the coffee is less like battery acid and more like coffee. We sat in the same booth by the window. The napkin dispensers are new. The view hasn't changed. People still hurry by with their lives held in their hands like they might spill. We ordered scrambled eggs and wheat toast because you don't mess with a good story. We brought the napkin with his phone number, the ink gone but the impression still there, and we took a picture of it on the table where it started. We sent the photo to our niece with a text. This is where the movie began. She texted back 4 red hearts and a promise to put our picture on her fridge. You want to know the most romantic thing he's ever done? It was not a grand gesture. It was not a surprise trip or a diamond anything. It was the morning he woke up at 4 a.m., because the storm that had been bothering my back for days had finally arrived and turned me into something made of ache. He put on a pot of coffee quietly, so quietly, and he made me oatmeal with thin slices of apple, the way my mother used to. He sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed my knee and told the worst jokes you can imagine. He stayed. He has always stayed. He is my life. I know how to make doctor's appointments and meet deadlines and send thank you cards on time because I learned it from him. 1,000 acts of staying. We have a garden now. It is small, like us. The tomatoes are stubborn, and the basil is cocky, and the zucchini pretends it will never amount to anything until it suddenly becomes a more urgent situation than you planned for. We have a little stone we keep in it that says in blunt lettering, "Be here." I forget sometimes. He never does. He is the man who stops on the sidewalk to marvel at a spider web. He is the man who knows you can find hope in the way a stranger holds a door. We sit out there in the evenings and listen to the neighborhood. There are children who push bedtime. There is a man who whistles "Lean on Me" every Tuesday. There is a couple who have known each other since they were very young, and they hold hands like it still amazes them they get to. Last winter, my father's hands shook at the end. He was 90. He loved my mother until she told him, very sternly, that he had done enough and could rest. He loved me. He loved Michael like a son and used to tell him, "I don't understand the way you do everything so slowly," and then wink. Because he had learned what I learned, that Michael takes his time because he is paying attention. We drove to say goodbye. We sat with them in that small, bright room that smelled like lemon oil. Michael made tea. He changed the light bulb in the hall because that is what love looks like sometimes. My father asked him to come closer, took his hand in that surprisingly soft grip men who have held hammers their whole lives have, and said, "Take care, my boy." Michael leaned in until his forehead touched my father's. "Always," he said. He is my life, I thought, in the same breath I thought I am his. People sometimes ask us for advice. I wish I had something fancy to offer, a secret recipe, a new trick, a 5-step plan. I have none of that. I have instead this: show up. Take your time. Learn the names of the people around your love. Ask about their day and then really listen. Keep a drawer of emergency chocolate. Carry jumper cables. Don't aim your anger like a weapon. Don't aim your silence like one either. Let a good song play all the way through. Say you were right when they were. Say I am sorry when you should. Say I love you when they are across the room buttering toast and when they are across the city on a tough afternoon. Use the good plates on a Tuesday. Keep a pot of soup ready when the weather turns. Leave notes like breadcrumbs back to yourself. We renewed our vows this summer in our backyard under the same maple tree that keeps our memories like birds. The arch my father-in-law built is still there, repainted with the indentations of our names worn soft by rain. We invited the neighborhood. We printed our vows on cardstock and left little pencils for people who wanted to write blessings. The sun came through the branches of the maple in a way that made the air look like honey. Our niece strung mason jars with fairy lights. The kids ran through the sprinkler twice and pretended not to be cold. Michael wore a linen shirt because he'd become that man, and I will never stop finding that incredibly charming. We stood together, the new gray shining in our hair like silver threads someone had sewn in with care, and we said the words again. I promised him I would be the hand at his back in every room. He promised me he would be the steady voice when I forget the song. Someone's baby cried. Someone laughed. Life, in all its messy beauty, hummed along around us. Afterward, we sat on the porch, the last of the ice melting in the cooler, a breeze finally deciding to show up. We were quiet. We have learned how to share quiet. The streetlight ticked on. A moth made a terrible decision that ended in the porch light popping once and then going out. He reached over and took my hand. "We did good," he said, his voice low and reverent like we were in church. "We did," I answered, because sometimes the truth is the simplest thing you can say. I remember once asking my mother, years ago, how she knew my father was her person. She was stirring soup. She did not look up. "He's the person I wanted to tell," she said. "About everything. The good, the bad, the strange, the nothing at all. When something happened, I had to tell him first." That is what this has been. He is the person I wanted to tell when the hospital got a new scanner. He is the person I wanted to tell when I saw a child at the grocery store carrying a cabbage like a crown. He is the person I wanted to tell when my friend's father died, because I knew he would come to the funeral even though he didn't know the man. He is the person I wanted to tell when I noticed a new line on my face, not because I was sad about it, but because I wanted him to be the first to see the proof that we are getting to live long enough to grow into our faces fully. There's a line from a poem I can't quite remember. It's something about the heart being a door that opens to the same place no matter which way you push. That's us. We come home to the same table, the same kettle, the same map of the creek in the hallway, and the window that sticks in winter. We have become a conversation that keeps going even when the room is empty. I look at his shoes by the door and the way he stacks the mail by the bowl with the keys, and I feel this wave of gratitude that is not a theory. Not a moral lesson, but a physical thing. Like light warming your face in a cold car. If you are someone who is still finding your person, listen, do not rush. Do not keep your heart so safe you cannot hear it. Be unreasonable in your tenderness and practical in your logistics. Learn to cook one thing well and make it for them. Ask better questions. Watch how they treat the server. Watch how you feel in their silence. When you find the one, hold their hand the way you would hold a rare book. Gently, with the sense that you are both protecting and being entrusted. When you are uncertain, say so. When you are certain, say so twice. If you already have that person, make room for their hobby that you do not understand and they cannot explain. Go to the store and get the exact batteries they want, and then do not complain when they have a stash of 6 different sizes in the drawer labeled MISC. Kiss their temple in the kitchen. Make their favorite breakfast on a Wednesday just because. Fold the laundry with care. Sit with them when the news is bad and remember the world is also flowers and music and the curiosity of strangers. Do not keep score. Keep time. Keep it gentle and steady. He is my life. Maybe you have your own version of those words. Say them out loud. Write them down. Put them in your pocket, like a napkin with a number on it. And when the day comes that you sit across from the person you love, at a diner by a rain-streaked window and the waitress calls you, "Hun, and the coffee arrives hot and hopeful," reach across the table, not dramatic, just steady, and touch their wrist. Feel the pulse there, the proof of everything you have walked through and will walk through. Smile like you know a secret because you do. The secret is that love is not what you fall into. It is what you hold every day, with both hands. It will not always be easy, and sometimes it will hurt, and you will be tempted to find a quieter life that never asks anything brave of you. Resist that. Choose this. Choose the life where you pick up a pen that rolled under someone's table and you say your name and you mean it and you wait at a hospital door and you dance under a backyard arch and you plant basil and you wave at the neighbor kid and you forgive each other and you take turns washing the mugs. With the ring marks only you know by heart. He is in the next room right now, probably humming. Probably reorganizing the spice rack he insists makes more sense by height. I'll go in there when I'm done sitting here talking to you. I'll kiss the top of his head because I can. I'll tell him I told you about the napkin and the peaches and the drive-in and the time he stapled my slipper. He'll laugh. He'll say I left something out, and he'll probably be right because who can hold a whole life in one sitting? Not me, but I can hold this truth. He is my life. Not my only reason for living. No. We learned better than to put that weight on one another. But he is the steady song that makes the rest of it make sense. He is the person I go to first. He is the place I come home to. He is the quiet and the laughter and the knot of my tie before we leave the house. He is the look across the room that has not changed in all these years. He is the hand steadying me when the hallway is dark. He is the coffee left warming for me every morning, beside the ring mark on the kitchen table that you would not notice unless you lived here and had learned the rhythm of us. If you are sitting with someone right now, reach for them. If you are not, reach for yourself with the same tenderness and know in your bones that joy is not an accident. It is a choice we make and make again. And if you're ever in our city and you find the diner by the library with the window that faces the street, and if you sit in the second booth with your book and your coffee and your hopeful heart, be careful with your pen. Sometimes it has someplace important it needs to be. Sometimes it knows what you need before you do. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the person who picks it up will smile at you like the whole world has turned a light on, and you will say your name and everything after will make sense. Easy as a hum in the morning. We are getting older, and I do not say that like a warning. I say it like a sunrise, coming whether or not you are watching and so worth watching. We walk slower now. We make a ritual of going to bed, windows cracked if the night is kind, a book placed spine up where we left off. He tucks his feet under mine, always cold. We talk in the dark about little things, then we say goodnight, like teenagers, dragging the word into a smile. When I wake in the night, as men of our age often do, I listen for his breathing. It is steady. It is the sound I have planned on all my adult life. It is the proof that the world, for the moment, is as it should be. One day when the time comes and one of us goes first, which is a thought I hold only gently, only sometimes, I hope the one who remains will sit at this table, trace the ring mark from the mug and feel not only the ache but the abundance. I hope they remember the peaches and the porch and the wedding arch and the maple and the drive-in and the silly slipper. I hope they keep the good plates and the basil and the habit of leaving a little extra water in the kettle. I hope they tell anyone who will listen that love was not something we invented, but something we practiced, like music, until it filled the house and sometimes the street and sometimes the whole sky. For now, we are here. The kettle is singing. The light is sliding across the floor. The porch needs sweeping. The maple needs a trim. The neighbors are having their third argument about where the trash bins should go. The cinnamon is back on the top shelf where I can't reach it. He is laughing. I am laughing. We have errands to run and a life to live. He is my life. He has been since the pen rolled under my shoe and I held it in my hand like a compass pointing home.